Welcome to Hirsch, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education. The education landscape is always shifting as schools work to address a rapidly changing world and the challenges it presents for students. The secondary school years, grades 9 through 12, bring students to the precipice of entering deeper academic studies, the workforce, or both. How can we prepare students for the years ahead? What knowledge and skills do they need to succeed? Beginning in the 2027-28 school year, New York State will no longer require students to pass the Regents exams to graduate high school. Is this a change for the better? What do educators foresee as its effects? Today, EdCast explores these changes and more as we examine what it means to be a high school student today. Coming up now on EdCast. Joining me today are two educators with wide-ranging experience with secondary students. Ayinde Bennett is an experienced leader who has worked extensively in college access, post-secondary readiness, and work-based learning. Currently, as the post-secondary success manager at the Urban Assembly, he designs curricula, including the Career Connect Ed program, which focuses on work-based learning experiences. Ayinde Bennett helps students explore viable career options that will enhance their social and economic mobility. His approach is grounded in equity and social justice, focusing on collaboration, problem-solving, and leadership. Nicholas Paarlberg has been the principal of the Hostos Lincoln Academy of Science for over 20 years. The Academy is a school for grades 6 through 12 in the South Bronx. It collaborates with CUNY to provide students with an associate's degree upon their graduation. Nicholas Paarlberg started his career teaching in Massachusetts public schools, spent 10 years at Vermont Academy, and 2 years at the American School in Rome. He also has a graduate degree in creative writing. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me today. We want to talk about all things high school, and particularly what some of the changes are coming up and what we do to help high school students get ready to succeed. But first, I just want to know about each of the institutions that you're working at. So, Nicholas, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us about the Hostos Lincoln Academy, who your students are, what you see as the mission of the school?
Well, Hostos Lincoln Academy is a high school, started about 30 years ago. As a middle school, we began the middle school 21 years ago. Okay. And the concept at the time, President Fernandez, who was the president of Hostos Community College, her concept was to bring college to the community of the South Bronx. So the students that come in 6th grade, I refer to it as a 7-year process rather than a middle school, high school. And the students that come in 6th grade, the ultimate goal is to graduate with an associate's degree. They actually have the associate's, the college graduation is before the high school graduation. Presently, on average, about 40% of the students that come in 6th grade make it all the way through. So for every graduating class, about 40% leave with the associates, about 90% leave with some college classes. And then now we've expanded the whole opportunity to I think bigger than just the South Bronx. It's,
great.
We're part of the bigger early college CUNY community. So
that's great success. Can I just ask you what your demographics are in terms of your student body?
Well, originally the demographic of the South Bronx was primarily Dominican and Puerto Rican, but now that has shifted. We have a lot more South American students and West African students. But the one thing that really hasn't shifted is the staff and the faculty. I've been there 21 years since I started it, and I can say we have the highest average tenure of faculty in the CUNY system. And most of those teachers, you might have a student who might have a science teacher in 6th grade, and then when they're in 11th or 12th grade, they might have them for a health teacher. You might have an English teacher in 6th or 7th grade, and then as a creative writing teacher in 10th or 11th. So there's a lot of consistency with not only the staff but the students. There's a stability.
As a faculty member, that speaks to your leadership. When people are happy and they stay. Ayinde, let me ask you then, what is the Urban Assembly and for what areas do you provide support?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for asking and thank you for having
Sure,
me.
I'm happy you're here.
Yeah, so the Urban Assembly is a network of unscreened public schools throughout New York City. Essentially, you know, the Urban Assembly came around a little more than 20 years ago during the Joel Klein era, where they were trying to have smaller schools, offer support to those schools to ensure that the students were successful and the staff in those schools are also successful. So I think I believe around that time you had some of the CUNY high schools, you had New Visions. And so Urban Assembly, what we do is we provide those supports. So in leadership, social emotional learning, the team I work on, which is the post-secondary success and readiness team. And what we do in all those different kind of fields is we work with staff members that do that work in their high school to ensure that there are structures or systems that lead to success. So for me specifically with post-secondary readiness and success, I work with principals, I work with assistant principals, guidance counselors, anyone that has anything to do with post-secondary readiness for their young people. And as we know, that's expanding a bit. You know, it's college, but it's also how we're preparing them for careers, how we're preparing them for, you know, kind of alternate options that are maybe not necessarily college, and I believe we'll get into that.
Yes.
So that's primarily what the Urban Assembly does, and then the work that I'm doing, and kind of the stakeholders that I generally work with to accomplish it.
So let me get down to what really prompted me to have this kind of conversation. And the initial impetus was reading that in 2027, New York State is no longer going to require the Regents exam as a basis for high school graduation. So I wanted to ask you first, why do you think they're doing that? Does anyone have a thought about why they decided to? And what are your thoughts about it? Obviously.
Sure, I can jump in. I mean, I think, one, I think, you know, at the Urban Assembly, we focus on best practices, right? Like what's working in one place and how do we kind of adjust it to work somewhere else. And so I think there's a number of examples of schools that do not have regents, the consortium schools, or, you know, they have the English and the math regents, but they have other kind of either portfolio or assessments that kind of showcase the learning of students. I think the state, rightfully so in my opinion, is moving towards more kind of skill-based assessments, like how are we connecting the learning that's happening in high school with the real-world jobs that exist, the you know, kind of in-demand skills in career pathways that are out there. And so I think they're taking a firm look at how do we do a better job of ensuring that there's that pipeline. And I don't know if tests are a fair kind of assessment. Some people, you know, I don't even know if it's equitable in senses that some people just aren't good test takers, right? And so what are we doing about that population of student, right? So how do we come up with something that really allows students to demonstrate their learning? And I think doing away with the regents is one of the ways to kind of move that direction.
Now, Nicholas, your students are largely college bound. Many of them already graduate with an associate's. Do you think this change will really affect them in any way, or do you expect they still will take the Regents exam?
Well, I'm going to just take two steps back.
Go
I mean,
ahead.
I grew up in the seacoast of New Hampshire, small beach town, very similar to Coney Island, sort of. And I didn't have to take Regents exams. In fact, most of the United States doesn't take any formal exams. And I, as a principal, often look at the Regents exams as a real wall of creativity for teachers and curriculum, because sometimes there's a rush to get through a block of material. And some of those Regents exams, I think, were initially created to ensure that every student got the same amount of material, depending upon the school. But I think post-COVID, there was a realization that the Regents exams were not necessarily as important as they were in the past. Because I think the style of education has shifted overall. But I digress.
No, that's not a digression. That's a very...
I'm not so sure it's really going to affect our population, mainly because I did reference it as a 7-year process, but we really focus a lot in the middle school on reading. And we have reading classes that are sort of literacy advisories. There's a major focus on exposure, access, and application. And our students, most of the students in the school, they just have had a lack of exposure. So we really need to expose them to new material, new ideas, and the city of New York. Yeah. It's a shame that we live in literally one of the most popular cities in the world, but most of our students, I mean, my colleagues at Urban Assembly, they'll tell you their kids are not taking advantage of it as much as we like to all talk about it.
Well, in terms of the cultural aspects and opportunities, our college students don't even take advantage of what the city has to offer.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gone on class trips with students, and some of the places we go they've never been to.
Well,
So that's a whole other, but that said, if students don't take a Regents exam, which we have looked toward as some indication of preparedness, all right, whether or not we think it really
Right.
was a reliable indicator, how will students be showing their readiness for college without the Regents exams?
Well, I can take start with that. And I think there's a number of ways, right? I think, in a lot of our schools, and you see this across the city, students are taking AP exams, which will kind of show, you can earn college credit if you score,
Right.
if you score a thing of 3 or above. Dual enrollment, right? Students who are taking dual enrollment classes where they're getting both high school credit and college credit by taking a college level course that's while in their high school, usually it's via Zoom or some type of video interface. And I mentioned before, there's also, there's assessments, portfolio assessments. So really, if you're, let's say, doing an internship or apprenticeship or some kind of work-based learning, how are you demonstrating your learnings to, it could be your teachers, it could be your family members, it could be whatever it may be. There's also student-led conferences, which was something that I think was very popular at a point in time. Not sure if it still is, which essentially students, their family, their teachers, whoever, where they're kind of leading these meetings to demonstrate that kind of learning. So I think those are some of the many ways.
Right.
And I just want to emphasize, I think there are other solutions. And I think really what I want to get across is that being creative and thinking outside the box is what we need to do. So I might not have all the answers.
In terms of assessment.
In terms of assessments, right? I think, again, we've done it a certain way for a long time. It's not working for everyone. The pandemic was a major shakeup for folks, and I think we need to continue to ride that shift in how, and that change. I think we need to ride that out and be thoughtful of what is the best way to showcase the learning that young folks have done.
We're going to get to the pandemic later, but I do want to ask you, as a high school principal and as someone who works with high school students, do high school students feel ready for college, do you think? I know how we think if they're ready or not, but what do they think?
I just think of my own daughter. I think she was ready to get out of the house. I don't know if she felt like she was ready for college in the same way. I think the student at Hostos Lincoln, it's a little bit different because between 9th and 10th grade, there's about 40% of the 9th grade is taking their first college class. And we have some 12th graders who are essentially, they go to the college in the morning, they go to Hostos Community College in the morning.
I'm going to stop you just to clarify. So they go to the college, they're not taking with high school, they're taking this with college faculty. I just want our listeners to understand exactly what that means. So they go, tell us a little bit about what they do. So the real college
all
classes.
the college classes, we are a 20-minute walk from Hostos Community College. We used to be inside Hostos Community College. And now we're about a 20-minute walk away. And the 10th graders come to the high school in the morning, and then they go to the college at about noon. And the juniors and seniors are at the college in the morning, taking college classes with college professors. They're on the college campus, and then they come back in the afternoon. By the seniors are often, the big clump of them are ready to look at college. But we also have, I would say, 10 to 15 students, and this is, I think, rampant throughout urban assembly schools, as well as my other colleagues in CUNY. There's always a chunk of seniors who are worried about the unknown. And now it's, obviously it's very magnified. The unknown has gotten much greater. So I think that there's a lot of clinging, and I think it's a great example of the dedication of our schools, the CUNY Urban Assembly Group, that the faculty and staffs, the administration, the students, the parents, those are tight communities. And when these small schools really came into being, that was the force behind it. So, it's a mixed bag. Obviously, there's some that want to go, but there's a tight group that's,
I mean, I'm sure you're both aware that over the years when students have come to CUNY, a lot of them had evidence of needing developmental work. And while we now really do not have remedial courses, we do more of a co-requisite model, and there's no kind of exams that students have to take to move out of developmental ed. But what is your thinking about the fact that some students still will enter CUNY, other campuses as well, but not really showing all the skills they need in reading and math? And is that some of the work that you do to get them ready? I just want to ask about how that works.
Yeah, I mean, so to backtrack a little bit myself, so I used to be a college counselor at a public school in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And so I worked directly with students who come to 12th grade and are kind of missing certain understandings or certain skills. And because of that, at my time at the Urban Assembly, I created a program called Career Connected. Really quickly, it builds an in-school team to own the work. And there's a curriculum we created, and a lot of it is around students identifying themselves, who they are, what they're passionate about, what the career clusters are that exist. It looks at finances. It looks at what vehicle will get me to where I want to go, and it gets me. And then it also does backwards mapping, backwards planning, right? I say all that because what we realize is that students, this needs to happen earlier, right? It needs to happen at least in 9th grade, where there's an understanding. You don't know what you don't know, but how do we actually get students more familiar with what it takes to be a student in college, what it looks like, what it feels like, right? And so that's a lot of the work I'm currently doing or have done at Urban Assembly. So yes, we are addressing it directly by starting earlier and addressing some of these things that will come up, loans and financial, finances, all the big topics that will come up as they apply to college and enter college. Even things around, I mentioned self-awareness, but advocacy, right? A large piece of college is not just the classes that you're taking, it's navigating that system, right? So many, even most students drop out of higher ed because of finances. Right, so how are we addressing that? Knowing what the problem is, how do we address it earlier? You can't solve for everything, but you can certainly make it more familiar and more comfortable. So ideally, when young people are coming to me as a college counselor or our college counselor at our schools, they're the ones in the driver's seat.
Right.
They're saying, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to go. You help me figure out how to make that happen, as opposed to the other way around. So
now,
yes, we're addressing it in that way and in other ways as well. But.
As a high school principal, Nicholas, what are the skills that you want your graduates to have? I know the state came out with Portrait of a Graduate, but
Ayinde just mentioned the biggest skill of all. Is the self-advocacy. And
that's interesting. Okay. You see that as the biggest skill of all?
Well, it's comforting to say the students will enter college at a certain reading level, certain math level.
Right.
But I think the self-advocacy research has shown that that's the top element. And I mean, I think about how often, someone has to wait in line, or the frustration of trying to get on a CUNY technology platform and, going to find help. Where do you go for help? Or it's just the complications of all of that.
These are the life skills. I mean,
right. And
these are the things you use to function
and I will
in the
say,
world.
we have workshops for our students to say, okay, this is how you communicate with a professor. You're not texting, yo, what up?
Well, I get that sometimes.
Oh yeah, but that's how people talk. That's how people talk.
There's teaching them the format and the self-advocacy skills, when to be assertive, because I think that's an underused skill, as I like to
or
tell.
Overused by some people.
Well, I like to tell my
whatever.
students. I like to tell my students, waiting is a bad habit, and you can't you can't wait around for an education to happen, and you can't wait to get access to it. So
now, there's a lot of talk lately that not everyone should go to college, and there are apprenticeship models being presented. So what are your thoughts about that? Does everyone still have to go to college, or are there other avenues to success that, that don't include college?
Well, I can say I think, I hate to go back to the pandemic piece, but I think that has changed the model for what is necessarily important for everybody.
Okay, in what way?
Well, I look at, for instance, the college readiness aspect, and we say, are our students college ready for CUNY? Well, CUNY has, 20% or something of their classes are online? How often do we have our students in high school take a class remotely or online? And we don't. And when we did, had our kids take it, we had to have a support class because that that advocacy for their own personal accountability wasn't there. They didn't understand how to budget their time. They didn't understand that even though it was remote over here, it was very serious and the gravitas was over here. So that's one aspect. But I think that the internships, I think technology pathways, I think we've seen it in a variety of schools in the city, media, film. I think the concept of college is shifting, and I think it's going to be ever shifting over the next few years.
Okay. Now, when you work with students, the pandemic, we've done a lot of information here on the show that students' mental health was severely affected by the pandemic. Are you seeing that in the students that you work with?
Yeah, I think, so again, shout out to Urban Assembly. We have, again, I mentioned SEL department that really...
Social emotional learning.
Thank you, for audience members. And so that really focused on how is this impacting young people? Like, how is this impacting their families? And to speak to the shift that we're talking about, the pandemic, so in addition to mental health, going back to that other question a little bit, I think young people and their families really thought about kind of their opportunities outside of college, right? Is college necessary? I think a lot of people were going to Colby or Colgate or fill in the blank for $80,000 and sitting on their couch, and they say, well, wait, what am I paying for here, right? And so I think those are the right questions of, is college worth it? And the pandemic really brought those out. But just to kind of piggyback, apprenticeships is another kind of model that is highly successful. You mentioned internships. I think I want to just also highlight micro-credentialing, stackable credentials, right? Certificate programs. There's a lot of programs out there. We work a lot with Marcy Lab, which is in Brooklyn, that focuses top students. They're not, your D and C grade level students, but your students who are very intellectual, very smart, go-getters, but college is not the path where they're really getting in-demand skills that are transferable, meaning they can be used in tech, they can be used in education, healthcare, right? But they're actually getting real certifications that can be used immediately. And when I say stackable credentials, I mean someone might come in as a resident nurse, but there are other certifications or credentials you can get that allow you to continue to elevate.
I think we need a whole other show on that.
We need a whole other show.
Okay. So we'll do a whole other show on that. That's a whole other show.
Right.
Very quickly, we're completely running out of time.
All right.
Cell phone ban in schools, yes or no? You're a principal, yes. What do you say? Should there be cell phone ban in school?
If it was me, yes.
Could be you.
Yes, we need one.
Okay, and what do you say?
I think of a caveat. I say no. I say yes and no, which is not what you're looking for. Because as a former college counselor, there are times where young people will certainly need their cell phones in the college process. For FAFSA, for other Common App, where they're sending you pins and things like that, where it's going to slow the process down if you don't have your cell phone. So maybe yes at certain times, certain restrictions, but that's my answer.
Okay. Last word for each of you. We only have a minute left. What do you want our viewers, parents, to know about high school students that we may not know? Principal Paarlberg, what should we know?
I think they should know that they're actually extremely hungry to explore and be creative. And there seems to be a dearth of opportunities presently. And I think that's one thing the city needs to explode, is to create more opportunities. Because I think when a parent comes in and looks at their child, they should know that they're really hungry for creativity.
Last word for you.
I mean, the young people are our future, and I don't mean that flippantly or to be cliche, but like they are genius. They are where it's at. It's always been young people. Parents can partner with CBOs, partner with the school. Parents know their kids better than we do, but it takes collaboration. It takes a village. Let's do it together. But our young people are genius, and we got to respect that.
Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. Nicholas Paarlberg, principal of the
Thank
Hostess
you.
Lincoln Academy. Ayinde Bennett from the Urban Assembly. It's a wonderful conversation. Don't go away. We'll be right back with our Ed Bites. Welcome back to this edition of Ed Bites. Each year, Education Week presents its word or phrase of the year, including runners-up. The winner for 2024 is cell phone ban. Calls to ban cell phones from schools are based on concerns for students' mental health, improving student concentration, and attempts to reduce bullying. By December, at least 19 states had passed laws or enacted policies to ban or limit student cell phone use in school. And the runners-up are AI, or Generative Artificial Intelligence. This technology is making great strides in schools and is being applied by both teachers and students, even amid concerns about its use and teacher preparation. Runner-up number 2 is the word disruption. Will President Trump upend and disrupt education as we know it? He says he will. Stay tuned. Other finalists for Word of the Year were Fiscal Cliff, amid concerns of federal funding cuts; Culture Wars; Project 2025; Lucy Calkins, Fontes, and Pinnell, based on the signs of reading controversies; Chronic Absenteeism; and Private School Choice. 2025 is sure to provide its own Word of the Year. Disruption seems a likely carryover. That's it for this edition of EdCast. Stay tuned as we watch 2025 unfold. Thanks so much for watching, and keep in touch.
We'd like to hear from you. Please send your thoughts and comments to CUNYEdcast@gmail.com.